inshallah later on. The other topic that I have for you and today, this is really some high-level thoughts that I wanted to share with you from my specialization as an economist, as an Islamic economist as well, and this to provide some high-level perspective on the COVID-19 pandemic, and the very from the outset is so critical, so important to anchor ourselves in the Quranic view of everything that happens to us. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Quran al-Kareem in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. So we certainly test you with a touch of fear and famine and loss of property, life, and crops. Give good news to those who are patient and endure, who, when faced with a disaster, they say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Subhanallah, this verse almost exactly describes the situation that we live through these days. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us at the end of the day, whether we live a day from now or a minute or 100 years from now, we're ultimately going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whatever we are given in this life, whatever resources we are given in this life, we need to do well and to do good with these resources. If I have a moment to live, I need to really think hard about how am I giving my life. So the issue is not to worry about death. I can take every precaution and then I die from a sip of water. And I can, some other people live with many different life-ending diseases, but they can live with that disease for years and years and years. So at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of everything that we live through. And this is very, very important that it helps a Muslim, a believer, to be anchored, to not be in a state of hala and just like uncontrolled fear and loss. When it comes to this issue about how the global focus on defeating COVID-19, there is a loss of focus, a loss of most of the time, loss of thinking about how we are going to win the peace after this war against COVID-19. Because sometimes a battle or a war can be so destructive for everything and everybody, for the environment, for humanity, for animals, and then so the peace that comes after it is so meaningless. So we look at how our effort to try to defeat COVID-19, we see, at least from an economic perspective, that we are still obsessed with the symptoms. So that we have very huge debt. Like even like this cover of the Economist magazine, the number one they are obsessed about. I mean, yes, they're trying to see how healthy growth can come back. But then the focus area is debt. The world is going to face a debt crisis, and that is going to be very bad for growth. But this is overall a miss focus. This is a sad focus on debt versus what will be the status and well-being of humanity and all of Allah's creations on earth. We're still using the wrong goals, the wrong maqsad here, which is growth. All that we are obsessed with is growth. Growth is not the objective. Growth is a tool to achieve something else. Now, what is this something else is really the critical thing where Maqasid-based thinking is important. And we are still using same old solutions, flooding financial market with cash. I mean, especially in America where we control the dollar. We just issued trillions of dollars out of nowhere to simply try to address an economic problem. But previously, we could not issue few $100 billion to solve an environmental problems. But suddenly, just to bail out big companies, we have trillions of dollars to spare. And we are still healing from the Great Recession of 2008. So, and that is really what it tells us, we have a mental disease and we have a body disease. And every time we try to help the body get over its immediate problem, but we never address the mental problem, which is how we are thinking about our life, how we are conducting our life. We keep trying to cure a cold with a stronger and stronger dose of antibiotic, for example. But we don't say, well, if you change our lifestyle, then we can have a healthier lifestyle, and then we don't need to have that antibiotic. So as a result, what's happening is that we keep getting the same disease and again and again and again, but every time we have to provide stronger and stronger medicine, stronger and stronger dose of antibiotic, which is really, unfortunately, just make our tools, our solutions obsolete over time. So we have old problem-solving tools may no longer be relevant. So we need to win the peace. We need a Maqasidi-based thinking to win the peace. So we are managing the journey, the crisis, but where are we going to end up at the destination? So there's a strong need for purposeful and holistic solution versus reacting to the crisis. Like, how are we preserving human dignity at the end? And what are the solutions we are using now that will make this preservation of human dignity possible in the long run? And if we are all in this together, including all who live on Earth, it is no longer just the welfare of humanity. We really, really are guardians of everything. So when we think about solutions for the environment and solutions for COVID-19, we actually obliged as believers, as Muslims, to also think about how the solution going to affect animals, going to affect the environment and every aspect of our life. So the solution needs to be that more holistic, because we are actually going to be asked about these all of these creations. Right now, we are talking about millions and millions and millions of animals, of chicken, of cows that will be simply euthanized, will be killed and dumped because the people don't know what to do with them. So that is a massive sin that humanity is committing. And as believers, we think that is very, very important for us to address. Yes, there is global cooperation at the level of healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and that is good, and we can further support this effort. But there is also this massive indebtedness at all levels that will result from this, and that will make the world more unbalanced, more unjust. There are people who control more wealth, and those who are really barely have anything, any resources or income to speak of. So what are our moral values, and what do we want? What do we stand for? How can we live with ourselves? And here I want to give you a quick example from our energy versus the environment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran al-Kareem, أَرَأَيْتُمُ النَّارَ الَّتِي تُورُونَ أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ النَّارَ الَّتِي تُورُونَ أَأَنْتُمْ أَنشَأْتُمْ شَجَرَتَهَا أَمْ نَحْنُ الْمُنشِئُونَ نَحْنُ جَعَلْنَاهَا تَذْكِرَةً وَمَتَاعًا لِلْمُقْوِينَ فَسَبِّحْ بِاسْمِ رَبِّكَ الْعَظِيمِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to declare Allah His glory in relationship to energy, in relationship to this fire that we see, this fire that we light, which all comes back to this origin from trees, from fossils that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put on earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين. And all this energy is to remind us, to anchor us into He who created this energy. And this energy is mata'an lil muqween, is this sustaining. This is something that is going to help us on a journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not a journey to produce as much as possible, to ultimately declare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's glory in all possible ways and means. So what humanity faces is that we have this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this very, very tough test, that oil is so cheap. In America, we were offered to be paid $40 just to take a barrel of oil. This is how cheap oil became. On the other hand, because of the COVID-19, many cities finally experienced clear sky. Finally. And that was an amazing experience, because after decades and decades, there are cities who lost any sense of what does it mean to live a clean life. So this was a challenge to humanity to do what is right. And when we ask what is right, is it right to have animals that looks like that, or is it better to have clean environment? So the right choice is obvious for those with healthy conscience, with clear fitrah, and sometimes we lose that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this corona crisis to see how things could be different if we make better choices and we make these tougher choices, because it's not a matter of consuming more, but it is a matter of enjoying what we are consuming and living holistic life and living in peace with all of Allah's creation. It just requires us to have a commitment. So alternative Maqasidi consideration here is that we have key elements to reforming and improving our response is to identify the general Maqasid of Islam and the subject area based on the holistic research of Quran and Sunnah. Ask the proper questions at the macro and micro level. What is the current economic policy versus how we want it to be at the large level, at the level of the country, as well as the level of the individual. Each pro or con argument needs to be examined rigorously according to its various applications and implications. And here to give you very quick two examples of this micro and macro. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran al-Kareem, وَابْتَغِ فِيمَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ وَلَا تَبْغِ الْفَسَادَ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. So in this foundational verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes, all of how a believer looks at the resources he has on this earth. That is ultimately is to seek Allah's pleasure in the hereafter, while partaking and enjoying this life and contributing to this life, and while also being good, just like as a test of being good to everybody around you, just like Allah has been good to us, and then not to spread mischief on earth. So this mischief is really what is destroying this earth. Inna Allah la yuhibbul mufsidin, that we indeed for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala love not those who spread mischief, whether it's environmental damage, whether it is poverty, whether it is sweatshops, whether it is consumption of haram products, so on and so forth. At the macro level, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, أوفوا الكيل ولا تكونوا من المخسرين وزنوا بالقسطاس المستقيم ولا تبخسوا الناس أشياءهم ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين. Give full measure and cause no loss to others. Weigh with even balance and do not defraud people of their property, and do not spread corruption in the land. So as a general principle, that be just to everybody. If you are employing a person, then do not cut them loose. Do not over bargain, because that person might not be in a good position to bargain back and to insist on the full measure of his right. But as an employer, I might be able to push down the price or push down wages. But then you are not being just. You know yourself that you are paying that person very low. So this is not the right way. وَزِنُوا بِالْقِسْطَاسِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Of course, always be just in all dealings. وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ. And this is, again, do not belittle what people have. Do not demean what people have. Whether it's a talent, whether it's a work skill, whether it is a product, do not put it down. وَلَا تَعْثَوْا فِي الْأَرْضِ مُفْسِدِينَ. This is a general rule for everybody. So what about حفظ المال? Recently I was attended a lecture or an event about Maqasid solutions for the current problem. And the major issue that is happening, sometimes, again, the whole sphere, the whole discussion is about, well, we're trying to preserve wealth and we're trying to grow wealth. while also trying to do good for the rest of humanity? How can I forgive debt while I do this and that? And these are, it seems that they are contradictory. The preservation of and promotion and growing wealth at all costs versus, being good and implementing these Islamic principles of forbearance of debts and so on and so forth. Yes, there is a contradiction because at the beginning, this objective of promotion of wealth is not something that is really in the Quran al-Kareem or the Sunnah. There is protection of wealth, which is because this is a necessity. If I don't feel safe with my wealth, then the social order can break down. So protection is one thing, but the promotion of wealth, seeking growth for its own sake, this is not actually an objective. So the way to introduce maqasid as a source of solution for current problems is not to think of wealth growth as an objective by itself, rather as a mean to this objective, which is ultimately to help humanity live a conducive, a dignified life. So, and then again, in the response formulations, there is obsession with halal and haram, rather, and ignoring the concept of makarim al-akhlaq. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really want us to do? If the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is with us right now, how we would like ourselves to behave in the proper and the most beautiful ways to reflect his sunnah and the Prophet's beautiful example, and how that reflects in public policy and so on and so forth. So it is not simply a dualism between black and white, halal and haram. It is what is the best set of action. How can I prove myself to be a great and wonderful servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then, and in conclusion, I would like to say that the size of the challenge that we face as an ummah and as a humanity, it is really way, way beyond the COVID-19. So we need to be ready for these other challenges. COVID-19 will be nothing, will be absolutely a very tiny problem compared to human cloning and creating genetically enhanced humans, machine enhanced humans, and so on and so forth. That will be a massive, massive challenge that humanity is facing going forward. And I pray that through Maqasid research networks, we'll develop that new crop of researchers who, again, provide Islam's leading voice, moral voice, intellectual voice, and intellectual leadership on these issues. In one statement, it says that in 100 years from now, all babies will be genetically designed babies. That's the statement. That's where one thought leader think that humanity will end. Well, that is a very, very strong statement, and we want to have at least the tools ready in place to deal with these challenges and to know it's not simply a halal and haram question. It is where should we be as a humanity, where we should be as Muslims. This is please excuse my quick presentation here, and maybe this is many of these thoughts on maqasid and of economic maqasid is really in early stages, but I wanted to share this with you, and inshallah I can benefit from your questions if you have any or your corrections. Jazakumullah khair.